Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of our SaaS Monday Live on Friday series, which is a LinkedIn community we're trying to help establish for folks building or interested in SaaS and building new SaaS businesses, bringing new SaaS offers to market. I'm joined today with I'm joined today with three of my friends and three amazingly talented people in this particular topic. Bill Tarr from AWS SaaS Factory, Markus, who is at AWS SaaS leader within EMEA, and Sri, who is wearing two hats today. And I'm going to let him explain that to you. He's a CEO of one of AWS's best marketplace partners, as well as one of their best SaaS competency partners. And so one of the things I'm going to start this particular call off with is just a conversation on, the different roles that as a SaaS company, the different types of people you're going to encounter on your SaaS journey and how they can help along the way. And obviously the goal here is to talk about marketplace and building a successful go-to-market with your SaaS offer on I'm sorry, there's a question here about sound. Bill, are you hearing everything okay? Okay, like I said. And so we're going to talk about, obviously, the goal here is a successful go-to-market, and we're going to present here a case for why marketplace is incredibly important for a successful go-to-market. But along the way, you're going to need to build your SaaS offer. You're going to need to successfully navigate the waters of putting a solution on cloud. And since we do have a lot of expertise here from AWS, we're going to focus the conversation mostly on, from an AWS perspective. But I can tell you definitively, having worked with all the three clouds and spent 10 years at Microsoft, the roles and conversation that we're going to have today actually applies to all three of the major clouds. And that's where and so we can, while we're going to use AWS as the example here, the things that we're saying and doing, you can cross-apply to the three clouds. And so I'll start because we're one of the more common types of partners. And so, Michael Cooper, I'm here representing Omnistrate. We're an ISV, so we're a product that sits on top of a cloud like AWS. And we add value, and what we add is the ability to significantly. We create a SaaS control plane as a service, which allows companies to significantly to significantly go faster. So you can build your SaaS offer quicker. You can integrate with AWS services in a cleaner way. If you want to build your own SaaS control plane, which you can, and Bill can talk about what SaaS Factory does and how they can teach you how to do that. It'll take you, 6 to 7 months to build your control plane, or you can look to an ISV like Omnistrate, and we can build it for you. And so that's the role of Omnistrate in what is called an ISV partner in the world of AWS or cloud. And so I'm going to kick it over to Bill next. Bill represents a group called AWS SaaS Factory, which is part of the partner team at AWS. Bill, do you want to walk through where AWS, the partner program and SaaS and groups like SaaS Factory can help a startup on the way?
Yeah, absolutely. And we do talk to hundreds of startups. I will emphasize that as many startups as we can talk to, we're still a relatively small team at the SaaS Factory, and we very much rely on our SaaS competency partners. We have around 40 SaaS competency partners, Ibex Labs being one of our premier SaaS competency partners, who Sri is representing here today. So I'm glad to be talking with a SaaS competency partner, because to be perfectly honest, if you're implementing Marketplace, it's probably not me doing it for you. It's going to be his team who's going to be able to help you most in terms of being able to get listed on Marketplace. It's one of those decisions, like we'll often help guide customers through decision points, understanding how to build SaaS, emphasizing building for building platforms like Marketplace and being diverse in how you implement those. But usually it's going to be our third-party integrators who will get you live on Marketplace. And they can do it pretty quickly in a matter of days. There is some undifferentiated heavy lifting to processes like Marketplace. It's like setting up, if you've ever set up a new AWS account, if you ever set up a new AWS organization, it's one of those things you probably do once in your job, and you might be 5 or 10 years before you have to do it again. Like Control Tower is a great example. Like, it's very intricate, takes a long time to set up. Marketplace can be a little bit like that. There's some undifferentiated heavy lifting. It's an area we often bring in partners to talk about. But there's a lot to building SaaS. Finding the right partners to help you build those, including our team, including our SaaS competency partners, is pretty critical to your journey in terms of building SaaS.
Thank you, Bill. And because the first kind of question I'm going to give in terms of how to build Marketplace will be to Sri, I'm going to kick over to Markus now and to kind of explain the role of where the AWS has some very technically competent and amazingly gifted folks out in the field who help people build and find success at a regional level. So Markus, can you kind of talk about your role in your org and where people would find, where people are going to kind of run across people like you as they build out their SaaS journey?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I'm Markus. I'm working as a solutions architect with AWS. I'm not in the partner organization, which means we work directly with customers. In my case, I'm working with a lot of startups located all across EMEA. Focus is on Germany. That's also where I'm located. But I'm working with various customers also outside of Germany, and they are all startups. So what we actually do is we first go in and take a little bit of a step back, understanding also the business model, right? So the business model often is relevant if you are, because you need to try to understand, hey, what are the customers that this startup actually is trying to win over for their products, and depending on the customer type, certain channels play an important role. AWS Marketplace was mentioned here a couple of times. Maybe it's direct sales when a startup is, just coming out of the bootstrap phase, and so on and so on. But this is super critical to take the whole conversation from here to also judge with all the experience that we have over so many customer conversations and also tight customer engagements, to really help them to make a good judgment call on which channel to embark and where they would find the ideal customer profile, right? And what we see very often is that startups, they start small, obviously, right? They have maybe a familiar customer set because of prior work experience or connections. And that's very natural to follow that route. But at some point, they may change, they may pivot because they see a bigger or they want to tap into a bigger market. And then it becomes very often a challenge. Yeah? It's not very easy to set up a big sales force, both from an investment perspective, but also from of course, from an organizational perspective. And that's where channels like the AWS Marketplace come in very handy.
Love it.
And that's where we help them. Yeah, cool.
And so, Sri, moving over to you, sir. Again, you're here wearing two hats. So you have you've been a SaaS competency partner for a while. You've got a lot of experience in that space. And as Bill's mentioned, AWS likes you a lot because you guys produce great results. But there's also kind of this marketplace partner, which is a little bit newer in the world, but it's also kind of exploded, and there's a lot of marketplace partners out there now too. And so, can you explain? We'll start with what's a SaaS competency partner, and what can you guys provide, and then also kind of what's a marketplace partner, and when would somebody kind of need each?
Sure. Again, thanks for having me part of this show. And I'm just some introductions. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ibex Labs and Labra. So Ibex Labs, we're a SaaS competency partner. It's one of the competencies that we're very, very focused on, and it's extremely important for us for a few different reasons. We work a lot with startup B2B SaaS ISVs, and what does it mean to be we're a dual partner, but what does that exactly mean? We can help B2B SaaS ISVs build on AWS, help with build of their SaaS applications, both from a architecture standpoint, build standpoint, and also manage on an ongoing basis as well. And out of that experience is kind of why we started Labra as a cloud go-to-market platform. So we help both on the technology side as well as the business side on how to go to market with AWS. So we have seen the entire spectrum of the journey of a B2B SaaS ISVs of starting to build on AWS, starting to go to market with AWS, but also tap into AWS as a channel, but also beyond that, how do you also use other AWS partners as a channel, right? So it's a end-to-end flywheel motion that we enable B2B SaaS ISVs from all the way from the start to taking some initial steps, scaling them, and activating at a channel beyond AWS and working with multiple partners as well. So very excited to be part of this show and looking forward to our conversation.
Excellent. And so if we start kind of down the marketplace path for a second here, so we'll focus in on marketplace first. And so marketplace was a kind of a niche or a fun concept 4 or 5 years ago. Let's go niche probably 6 years ago, fun 4 or 5 years ago. But somewhere along the way, it's become mission critical. And so if you're a startup and if you're thinking about this and you're going, yeah, I'm going to need to do that eventually, we're here to tell you, we're here to make the case. You should probably do that first, right? And you should probably do that now. Couple of reasons why. First, realize that the marketplace is far bigger than you think. AWS, for example, and just AWS, I'm not talking about the other ones, have more than one customer or more than one partner transacting more than $1 billion a year through AWS Marketplace. And again, let me say it again, more than one partner doing more than $1 billion a year. That is insane. I've personally run a couple of different partner orgs in which we were doing multi-millions through Marketplace per year, and we thought that was a big deal. It's not anymore. Billions is a really big number. But there's some really obvious reasons that startups need Marketplace, and I'll kind of start off that conversation, but I would love to kick that off to the other guys who talk to marketplaces. The first is there are many organizations out there who are consolidating the number of vendors that they'll take on. And so when I was at Confluent, we saw this with a lot of the telcos. We saw this with a lot of the banks. And so it turns out that having 80 or 8,000 or 9,000 vendor relationships is painful and a lot to manage, and people don't want to do it. It's expensive to manage that many vendors. That means that they're shrinking the number of people that they can buy things from. And if you're a newer startup and you show up in the door of AT&T or Geico or Wells Fargo, the odds that you can delight the IT team is hard but doable. But the odds of then you getting the IT team to be your champion and convincing the procurement team that they're going to allow a new vendor contract from somebody they've never heard of is almost zero. But you can fix that because you can sell through Marketplace, and now the vendor is the Marketplace vendor. So in this particular case, it'd be AWS Marketplace, but there are other marketplaces out there. But by transacting through AWS Marketplace, you dramatically accelerate your route to be able to complete paperwork, move through some basic hurdles, and also transact in ways that make things from a billing and tax collection purpose a lot easier to manage. And so with that said, I'm going to kick it over to you, Bill, as you talk to a lot of startups and you from a corporate perspective, kind of have a pulse on where the AWS partner team is going. Does the AWS partner team prioritize people who lead in with Marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, not only do we always prioritized it and put a lot of emphasis on Marketplace. I think anyone who's building SaaS and isn't aware of the new messaging around Marketplace that's come out in the last 6 months really should catch up and go check out what we are starting to say about Marketplace. And there's some very specific benefits that you get from listing in Marketplace, and really your customers that you're selling to get very specific benefits from purchasing through Marketplace. And so if you're building SaaS today, and you haven't really dipped your toe into this and figured it out, there's a couple things I want to point out to you. If you're selling to enterprise customers, those enterprise customers will generally have what we call private pricing agreements with AWS. And those private pricing agreements come with a spend commit. So if you're a large customer on AWS, maybe you're spending millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars on AWS. So you say, hey, I'd like a discount on all of these things I'm getting. That's what the private purchasing agreement is. But in exchange for that discount, we're also saying you need to spend X number of dollars. When they purchase products through Marketplace, that counts toward their committed spend to AWS. This is one of the primary things you need to understand if you're selling SaaS to enterprise customers. They have these agreements in place. They really like their discounts. They don't want to lose their discounts. But their own spend, internal spend, can be variable. Buying through Marketplace and purchasing third-party products is very predictable. So they can say, listen, we're going to use this spend, this block of spend for these products we already want to consume. And we're going to use that to spend down the commit that we've made to AWS so we continue to get our discounts. Hey, and even maybe get better discounts. The larger amount I'm spending on AWS, the better discount AWS is going to give me. This is that value equation that you as a SaaS provider have to wrap your head around, because it isn't really just, hey, we always talked about AWS marketplaces having benefit to your customers because they're getting a single bill. That's a nice experience. I don't mind getting a single bill rather than 100 different bills from 100 different vendors. It makes my life a little bit easier. That was always pretty nice. There was always a security aspect. I can trust this a little bit more because it's gone through validation by AWS. We've gone through a review of the architecture and said, yes, we consider this to be a good architecture. It gives me a little confidence as a CTO buying this software. But the recent messaging, which is, I think, put a slightly different spin on things, is that now we're emphasizing that every product listed on AWS Marketplace, as long as it's completely built on AWS, your customers are now eligible for this PPA spend commitment reduction. So that's very new. It used to be only certain products qualified. All SaaS products listed in Marketplace now, as long as they can verify that they're completely built on AWS, their customers now qualify for this discount. That's a great advantage to startups who are trying to sell to enterprise customers. And as you said, Michael, there were already advantages. It was already easier for that customer to accept because the product was in Marketplace, that there was more security, better practices in place. Now they can also take this and say, hey, we're going to spend down our commit to AWS and our PPAs, that private pricing agreement. These all kind of lock together to make it really important for anyone who's a startup SaaS provider to be able to build through Marketplace. Maybe that's not your only billing provider, and I'm definitely not saying it should be, because you may have other customers who prefer other billing methods, but we're working backwards from our customer. Some of our customers will want that benefit of being able to pay down their PPAs to the Marketplace. Others may prefer, just a bill from Stripe or some other third-party billing provider. But make sure you understand the value proposition of who you're selling to. And if part of that value proposition is that PPA commit spend discount, you need to be listing on Marketplace, and you need to be doing it very early in your journey, much earlier than you think you might.
Love it. Sri, Bill just said a lot of AWS phrases that I understood because I live and breathe in cloud. But I suspect there are a few things he said that some of our startup folks probably aren't going to understand. And so can you kind of step in and explain where a marketplace partner can help navigate the waters that is AWS Marketplace, and where they might turn to a company like Labra to help it just make that acquisition a little faster?
Yeah, Bill did definitely bring a lot of great points, and I want to add to that. One of the things that we see often is, like B2B SaaS ISV selling to an enterprise customer. Maybe it's their first or second or third transaction, and suddenly the enterprise buyer says, "Look, we're okay with buying your product, but it needs to go through Marketplace." And we have heard about like the PPA burn down or EDP burn down, essentially like enterprise buyers committing to a amount of spend which they're going to spend over like 3 or 5 year period, and using Marketplace to burn down some of that commitment, right? So and that's why like naturally enterprise buyers are turning around and saying that, like, we're going to buy your product, but it has to go through Marketplace, and it becomes a tactical need at that point where customers come to say that, hey, we have this deal in the pipeline, it's ready to be closed, but we definitely need to get on Marketplace in a very short order. And at that point, now if the product team has to go and start understanding what Marketplace APIs they need to integrate with, how do they handle the buyer journey, etc., obviously it takes a lot of time, and that's kind of where providers like ourselves do come into picture, where we remove all of the integration requirements and only require, like, for example, what the product does, long form, short form content, as well as like what is the product pricing and dimensions, and we kind of help them get listed on marketplace, right? That's a tactical step. It's a very important step, but it's still a tactical step. But the other value which we also educate the customers is that, look, let's also think beyond just the EDP burn down. Let's look at, like, examples such as having like AWS standard terms and conditions, right? For example, if you're in the procurement team and you have handled a few transactions through marketplace, you probably are already aware of like what is an AWS standard agreement looks like. You already reviewed it. As long as customers are following the same format, it's easier for them to go through the legal T's and C's as well, and it just helps streamline the procurement faster. That's one. But we're also seeing that enterprise buyers on the other side are also doing some planning on their end to see that, okay, what are the things that we are purchasing outside of marketplace, and how do we kind of bring them onto marketplace, purchasing through marketplace, so they can essentially consolidate their IT spend, consolidate their budget, and that by consolidating now, as you're renewing your EDP, you can actually get bigger discounts as well, right? So that's still a tactical place where how startups get started, but it's a very important phase. But it's also helping you build a platform for you to scale beyond just a single or 2 or 3 transactions.
Love it.
And I also want to add one more thing. We just got back from Global Partner Summit. Proud to be one of the very few partners who have been invited to the Global Partner Summit. And all of the discussion this year has been around this marketplace and the new requirements that are coming in. And it's extremely important that as long as you're built on AWS and you're listed on marketplace, it helps the PPA commitment, right? So the requirements have become a little bit simpler now, and the advantages have become even more accessible for startups.
Love it. Markus, you again are part of the customer org, so your job is to specifically help named customers go accomplish things. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of AWS Marketplace, as well as from a customer success point of view, especially as it relates to EMEA? Because from a US perspective, we kind of take for granted if I'm selling software, I'm a California-based company selling software to a New York-based company. I'm just selling software. Yeah, there might be slight differences in state income tax, but I don't have to pay that much attention to it. EMEA is different. And so can you kind of talk through the places where marketplace is important, as well as the nuances that are doing business within the EU and GDPR and everything else?
Of course. So let me first, we talked about the marketplace. We also mentioned a couple of times enterprise customers. I think it's very important because this is the main customer segment that you will reach when you go through the marketplace. And I think it's super important to understand that these enterprise customers are not only very lucrative, they also come with a certain set of requirements and or behaviors, right? And one of the things that many startups underestimate when they're starting out is what you just mentioned, right? There's not just one buyer persona, right? There's the procurement team, there is the actual buyer, so to say, the decision maker in the company, there's a user, and these are all different people. And what we see very often when basically a startup embarks into this journey with an enterprise customer, it starts somewhere small. Yeah, so they have found, let's say, a unit, a small team potentially that sees value in using their application, their SaaS product. And maybe they start off with a credit card, right? So they just bypass a lot of the corporate processes to make it fast, to make it happen. And that's cool. But eventually, also from the SaaS provider standpoint, they want to run a land and expand motion. So they want to get bigger, and ideally, right, the application shows a lot of value to the enterprise customer. So more and more teams adopt this solution. And at some point, you will be on the radar of all the corporate functions, right? So suddenly IT will be aware of you. Suddenly, the purchasing team will show up and say, hey, what's going on over here? And that's okay, right? And then the story starts. And here's the best timing to have a marketplace listing handy, and then to kind of switch all your the whole transaction, the whole procurement processes over the marketplace. And as you rightfully said, right, it's a little bit of effort to embark on this. I mean, to list your product on the marketplace with all the integration there can be, and all the concepts that you will need to understand. I have to say there's good sample code out there. We have tons of material there. But if you're a startup, you have only so many resources to do stuff, right? And there, at least at the beginning, as you try to understand, is that something material to go over the marketplace, or is that just somebody from AWS telling me to do so? It's very good to kind of use a partner that has done this so many times, that can bring you into the market to the marketplace so quickly, and then test out yourself whether this is a channel that you see for yourself and that you want to double down going forward. But also to your point, hey, what is the AWS field organization doing in that regards? So our mission is to make the startups we work with successful, right? And successful comes always with a component of course, they need to grow. They need to grow in terms of customers, in terms of revenue, in terms of global, global presence, right? And here the marketplace is an important factor as well. So how does the AWS organization with all these field resources can help you? Basically, the whole organization is also incentivized to make this marketplace purchases happening. So if you, for instance, work as a startup with a large enterprise customer and you face challenges to find the right stakeholders, or you are very far in this decision-making process, but there would be a little help from outside coming in handy to make it through the door, then these are the moments where the account teams can really be essential and critical. And we think there's mutual benefit in that, right? So the enterprise wants to have very innovative solutions. A startup looks for more customers, and of course, right, if they find more customers, AWS can also assume that you will consume more resources on the AWS platform. And so I think it's a good situation for all parties, and that's why I do think that it's the right thing for a startup to go that route when they are looking for enterprise customers.
I love it. And so we've talked a lot about marketplace making things a little easier, but also we've mentioned a couple of times personas, and the different personas as a startup you're going to face in your sales process that you probably haven't thought about before, because sometimes you're expecting to meet the director of IT because they're the ones kind of looking at your product, or a business unit. Sometimes it's also the IT is scary because you're selling something to a business unit, and then suddenly you're facing IT for the first time, and they're different personas. And then you get into procurement, and then they're a completely different org with a completely different set of expertise. And so one of the things that Markus said, as well as Bill, that I think is really important is it helps to have someone standing beside you. And I do want to bring back to a follow-up question for you, Sridhar, on this topic. One of the things that Sridhar, you mentioned is a lot of times you see people from a Labra perspective, which is a marketplace co-sell partner or a marketplace listing partner for AWS. A lot of times you see people show up is because they're in a bit of a hurry because they've got their product, they've got their customer, and their customer said, great, but it's going to have to be a marketplace. And now they're in a bit of a panic because they don't know how to do that. And so having someone who's been there, done that, and understands the persona standing next to them is incredibly important. And so Sridhar, can we expand on that a little bit more in terms of why it's important to have someone who's been there before, when you're doing that first one, because you get into private offers versus pay-as-you-go versus container versus SaaS. So there's complexity there, but also it will lead into the next kind of topic I want to end this out on, which is co-sell. How do I then work with the AWS account teams on this conversation as well? So sure, can you?
Yeah, it's a great question, Michael. So marketplace as a go-to-market channel is a journey. It's not about just getting listed, right? So that's why it's very important to think like what happens next after you go through the first few tactical transactions, right? So how do you think about it as a channel beyond like only like a couple of customers, right? So that's kind of where the co-selling and everything comes into picture. But to do that effectively, you also need to be ready for it. And when I say ready for it, for example, let's say you get listed, but also we have to think about like, okay, how do you position that? Okay, not only we're listed, but also the software is certified, so that when security teams on the enterprise customer side are looking at your product, does it appear? Are you putting your best foot forward with saying that, okay, we have gone through and validated all of the security requirements that kind of shows the stamp of approval from AWS, right? So that's one angle. But also, like, how do you build that muscle, like a channel muscle of engaging with the field sellers from AWS, who's one of the most important critical part of the journey, right? How do you engage, understanding which segments that your customers are landing in, making that field connections and positioning your product. It's a very important part of the maturity curve as we see the customers grow into this channel. So having a partner like ourselves who have been there and seen all sets of customers, 2%, 3% startups to the likes of IBM who are doing co-selling at a scale, and seeing that entire maturity end to end, we kind of become their champion and a advisor in many cases, and like not just specifics of the marketplace, but how do you grow and expand into the channel, and what do you need to think from a 3, 6, 9 month standpoint, and understanding what success looks like. And obviously, we're not going to do everything in a single point, right? It's a maturity curve, and we kind of help them to the entire maturity curve. So that's why, like, we go beyond just listing. We work with them to strategically align on the product teams, their sales teams, etc., but also position in front of the field sales team, give an understanding of what are the great AWS programs that they can get into, so they can position better to the field sales team. And how do you start building that muscle of a co-selling motion that Markus has spoken about?
Love it. Bill, so we've thrown out a lot of acronyms out there. One of the acronyms we haven't thrown out, we probably should, is ACE. And so AWS has a number of tools out there, which is why, working with a company like who's been there, done that before, like Labra and Sridhar, is important. But let's talk about the importance of leveraging the AWS program successfully to increase your partner profile. And so ACE is the co-sell tool on with AWS. But can you talk about why those tools are important and how AWS kind of looks at partners who are participating correctly within the process?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, apologies for all the acronyms. I feel like AWS has never met an acronym it didn't like. Ever since I got here, I was like, even acronyms like the same acronym for two different things you'll find in this organization. So apologies out there if any of this does sort of fly into the corporate jargon radar. But yeah, ACE is an internal platform that the partner team has created, and it talks about co-sell, right? So when you have an alliance manager, when you have someone who's aligned with AWS, it's a lot of conversation back and forth. I think a lot of people sort of start off with the interpretation that your cloud provider is just a service provider. I'm buying racks of servers from you, and I'm putting my software out there and running my software. That's the extent of the relationship. And maybe for some companies that's the right answer, but for most people, especially SaaS providers, I think it's a mistake to not think of your cloud provider as your partner. And I encourage everyone who I've talked to about who are building SaaS to actually go to the AWS Partner Network, APN, and to join the partner network. And part of that experience is the co-sell that we're talking about. So there are a number of different angles where the partnership can help you. But in particular, these ACE opportunities where you actually go in and we're selling together. If you originated the sales, you're putting it into ACE and saying, yes, this is something we originated. We want AWS to work with us. We want to record that this experience was done with AWS. And then there's also Amazon originated opportunities, right? So our sales teams will reach out and say, listen, we have this other customer over here. Markus, being in the field, has seen this plenty of times. Hey, this customer over here is asking about your product. We want to introduce them to you. We are facilitating this transaction. It goes both ways. And that's where I think a lot of people don't see the opportunity of partnering with AWS. We have entire specialty teams that are aligned with verticals, automotive, for example. If you're selling to automotive customers, there are our business development teams that are focused on the automotive field and are in touch with all of those customers in those fields, can make introductions, can facilitate transactions with them. And we count those. ACEs are, our little chalkboard that we're up there figuring out how many times we've worked together on these transactions. And that helps us to quantify the value of this partnership together. And in turn, invest more into that partnership to the partners who are leaning in with AWS. So long story long, ACE is just that mechanism. ACE is the mechanism that says, hey, I was just looking at Drata's marketplace listing the other day for a customer. Hey, Drata's out there. How much are they selling with AWS? How often are they talking about us? How good is that relationship? And it was easy for me to verify, looking in ACE, talking to those people who represent that partner, they're a great partner. They lean in with us. All of their sales deals going through Marketplace, they're all checked into ACE. Those type of partners get a lot of attention from AWS. And if you think about that as a partnership and you invest in that partnership, AWS invests back into you as a partner. And I can't, strongly stress enough that for many people selling SaaS, maybe not 100%, but many people selling SaaS, that's a very valuable piece of their go-to-market strategy.
Beyond a doubt. Markus, from a field perspective, so when you're reaching out and helping your customers achieve a goal, are there times where you'll reach out and bring in a partner, or you'll stop and tell a customer, hey, you can do it this way, or I've got some partners here that can help you as well? And if you recommend partners, like many of the people kind of listening to our call, what makes you, trust that you can? Where do you find the partners you recommend, and how do you know you can trust them?
Yeah, so to your first point, it's a part of my job, right? I mean, as a startup, we said it before, you have limited resources, but that also holds for all other customers as well, right? There's only so much you can do, and there's way more things out there that you should do. And then the question arises, is this a build versus buy thing, right? What should I do on my own? What can I actually buy off the shelf because it's not value differentiating, or maybe it's just more expensive if I'm doing it, stuff like this. And I think that ties into nicely into what we said before, right? The marketplace integration. And yes, you need to have it, right? But maybe there are companies out there that have a product that is doing this for you. Yes, maybe it costs you some money, but hey, don't your valuable engineers have better things to do? Hell yes, yeah. And the same maybe goes for the control plane that Omnistrate provides, right? This is oftentimes something that you need to have, or an authentication and user management thing, right? But well, it's not perceived by the end customer as creating the real value. The real value comes from other things, and that's why it's probably something where you can consider a partner. So how do we do this in the field? First of all, we raise awareness, right? We try to bring up the situation that there are partners out there. Can be implementation partners that come in and provide professional services. That's also something, in areas where we see like migrations or other stuff. Typically things that you will do once in every now and then, but not very frequently, and hence you don't need to build out a muscle. But when it comes to other things, like I mentioned, authentication or user management, but also in the space of observability, in the space of security, Bill mentioned Trader in the context of compliance as a service. I mean, there are many things where it absolutely makes sense to go with a partner. How do we do this? It's like Bill alluded to already, right? So there are some partners that lean very heavy on AWS, and they are then also recognized internally for what they do. And we see that this is a trusted partner because we know that so and so many other customers have successfully integrated them into their product, into their workload. And that gives us confidence. And the second part to it is, it often helps also when there is a local team around that we can tie bonds and say, okay, look, this customer or this technology partner, this ISV, we know that they are not only existing on paper. We can pull in resources when there's a question, a technical question that needs to be kind of resolved upfront to understand how the full integration looks like. And then, we can show up as one team together in front of a customer. That's very much trust creating. And that's the way we are doing it very often.
Love it.
If I may jump in, Markus, I think you mentioned the awareness is what's important here, right? Awareness is what starts this conversation, and the way you build that awareness is through that co-selling, right? You register the opportunities, you show the few customer wins, you show the value prop, you show the business benefit for the buyer, and it's at the end it's selling, but we're all trying to sell together, and that's kind of the most important benefit here. And want to add to what Bill Tarr has also mentioned, that one of the things I had a dinner with a customer yesterday. I mentioned that let's not think AWS as an infrastructure provider. Let's think AWS as a business partner for helping you meet your goals. Some of the goals might be infrastructure, some of the ones might be business related or go-to-market related. So you have to think holistically on how to leverage the various teams within AWS, whether it's like infrastructure teams, whether it's business development teams, or even partner account teams, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times I have to talk companies in the same way on the same topic into why aren't you leaning in with AWS? And there's a lot of old misbeliefs there. And one thing I would say is the AWS 4 years ago or 5 years ago, as it relates to partner friendliness, is very different than the AWS of today. So I do really want to give a shout out to the AWS partner team, because 4 or 5 years ago, they talked a good game about partner, but they didn't really feel like you were leaning back in. One of the things that Bill was saying is, co-sell is two ways. Well, again, 4 or 5 years ago, that statement was made. It really was not two ways. But that's actually true today. So, I mean, we are absolutely seeing two-way conversations. I think the metric I used to give people was, it's 1 to 10. For every 10 deals you send them, they'll send you one. It's not 50-50, but it's a lot better than 10 to 1. And so, in my experience, it's probably 10 to 4, 10 to 3 if you're doing things correctly. And in the other 10 deals we're sending them, they are genuinely leaning in and trying to help, as long as you're playing the game correctly. And that is understanding the co-sell tools, ACE and APN, getting through Amazon FTR, which is the foundational technical review, getting your offers listed in Marketplace, making sure that your offer listed in Marketplace is tagged as built for or designed for built on AWS, or whatever the new qualifications are. And the one thing I'd say is, if you're not following with any of the acronyms that we're dropping, that's probably why you need a marketplace partner like Labra, and Sri is here to help. And because if you don't speak this as a second language, that's why you need someone who does. And Sri and company are very, very good at it.
Yeah, sometimes we forget that these are all like new acronyms. We throw like 10 acronyms, and we have to then step back and say like, okay, let me explain what this all means, right?
Michael, maybe to kind of shed an additional light to it. So if you are a startup and relatively new on the market, or you are trying to tap into a new customer segment, or a new market, I think there's also a big chance for you to collaborate with AWS. We have so many events that we are hosting and creating or being part of. And this is a very unique opportunity for you to basically join us there, maybe on stage, maybe as a participant, depends on the format, and then really have the chance to speak to these, to the kind of people that you actually want to, make business with. And that's very important, because at the beginning, you probably have a lot of gaps, right? And you want to understand, hey, where are the gaps? What do I need to do to be a lucrative, attractive to these kind of folks as well? Yeah? If you realize this at the end of a lengthy sales cycle, right? That's a pain. That's a really, you spend a lot of efforts and realize, okay, without an ISO certification, I don't have a chance, for instance, right? Or without, I don't know, certain integrations that are expected. But if you have the chance to have also informal conversation with these stakeholders up front, and to hear them out, to understand what's relevant, to understand what's going on in their respective market and in their contexts, I think that gives you a lot of insights that are super valuable for you to have and to kind of make decisions and shape your product potentially so that it's really fit for these kind of sales conversations at some point.
Well said. And so we are reaching the top of the hour. And so with that, Bill, I'm going to turn to you for kind of our closing remark as it relates to, where marketplace came from, and more importantly, where marketplace is going. Clearly, from my view, AWS is leaning in. But any last words of advice for people listening in, or still somewhat on the fence on, does marketplace really matter?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot. There's a lot of points I would make here. I think we've really just scratched the surface with some of the things that Marketplace offers. We've talked very much about how you list, why you should list. There's a number of other features of Marketplace that are relatively new if you haven't revisited the Marketplace lately, like being able to have a free trial experience on the Marketplace. This is critical for SaaS sellers. You have to have, if you're going to do any sort of product-led growth strategy, you have to have a free trial of some sort to let your customers try your product, in particular individuals. Markus was talking about the roles of buyers before. What we often see with SaaS products is it will be an individual in a large organization that really, plants the flag and gets you into that, eventually into that procurement team. Because the procurement team isn't just going out looking for you. You need that engineer, you need that product owner who tries your product first and starts to become a champion within the organization for product-led growth to really sing and dance. Free trials through Marketplace are a great mechanism for that. We talked about compliance a little bit, vendor insights, your ability to put on your Marketplace listing the specific compliance frameworks that you have. I was talking about Drata before. When I was looking at them yesterday, I immediately noticed they have SOC 2 and ISO 27001 listed in their vendor insights. That makes it a lot easier for anyone purchasing your product to understand that your product is vetted and capable of passing their own internal regulations. Beyond that, channel partners. If you're selling SaaS, your ability to partner with other companies who can sell is critically important for your go-to-market. Finding those channel partners. Marketplace has what we call channel partner private offers, where you can go to market with your channel partners and they can help you sell, you can help them sell. All critically important points for being able to understand how to think about Marketplace, how to list on Marketplace, how to sell. And that's just a few things we've got, like SaaS Quick Launch, which was launched at reInvent last year. They're still building out features there that will make it easier for customers to onboard your SaaS products. I've heard, I unfortunately can't share the roadmap here. I've heard a lot of exciting things that are coming in that direction in terms of new things that we're going to offer through Marketplace. I'm excited. I mean, over the last 2 years, it like you said, Michael, it's evolved. It's gone from an offering that was like, okay, that's nice, to wow, this is critically important. And that aligns with AWS strategy. I think AWS has also realized how important this is to our partners and our customers. And we've aligned with Marketplace to make sure it's a first-class citizen in your journey to building and marketing your SaaS products.
Love it. Well said. And I was a little disappointed in what you just did there, because you took my favorite acronym, which is CPPO, and actually spelled it out, which is Channel Partner Private Offer. And I like saying CPPO. But again, it's an evolving space. It's a dynamic space. And if you're not planning ahead for Marketplace, I think you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So with that, I want to thank you guys for joining. I always learn when listening to you guys talk. Hopefully our listeners join as well. So we will have a next SaaS Monday Live on Friday in 2 weeks. But thank you everyone for listening in, and thank you, Bill, Markus, Sri, for joining.
Yeah, thanks everyone. A great conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thanks. Have a great one.